Hi guys, and welcome here to another review. This time around I bring you the CCA Polaris. CCA, as we all know, is a sister company of KZ, and this is their latest single dynamic. They've gone down the road of also introducing switches, as you can see, and it's well, it's 10mm driver. I'm not really sure which driver is being used, if it's an XUN driver, although I don't think so. It seems to me to be a driver which is the same one found on the DFI, on the ZVX, dual magnetic driver. I think it's that driver, I'm not sure. It's always a little bit difficult to try and get that information. But anyway, it's got a decent enough build. I mean, metal faceplate, plastic shell, what seems to be a decent driver. It's got the switches and everything. The fit is perfect. There's really no issues when it comes to fits, when it comes to KZ and CCA. They always do their homework in that respect. It's not heavy IM. It's got the right weight to it, let's say. Obviously, this is not the stock cable. This is an IVipQ cable. In terms of the accessories, we already know how CCA and KZ are in the lower price stuff. That's always very basic cable, some basic tips. Although I have to say, they are using the Starline tips, which I have over here, and they actually work quite well with the Polaris. I have to say, I'm using the KB07 because I was able to. It seems to tighten up everything just a little bit more. That's my perception. Maybe with you guys, you might not find the same thing, but in my perception, it just seems to tighten up everything a little bit better. But the start tips are fine. I mean, they are very nice tips, and they actually do work quite well with the majority of the KZs that come with them. Anyway. Continuing on with what we want to know, which is what it's the sound like and how is it, so on and so forth. Well, I've done quite a few reviews with the single dynamics from KZ and CCA in the past, so I'm gonna try not to repeat all of that. So I just kind of brought out the ones which I think are kind of the most relevant ones. Okay, DQS, ZVX, DFI, the caster, which is a dual driver, okay, but it's here for a specific reason. And then on the CCA line, I brought here as well the ones which I think made sense. Well, actually, to be truthful, there's only one single dynamic here that's missing. But anyway, we've got the original CRA, we've got the revised CRA, the 2023 revised CRA, we've got the Lyra, and we've got the CXS. The only one that's missing here is the CRA Plus. There is a very common denominator with all of these, okay? They've always got a kind of a V-shaped signature where bass is very prominent. Now, what are the differences then, you ask? Very simple. The bass quantity and how that bass is married with the mids and the highs differs. For example, if we're talking about something like the DQS, it's probably one of the thickest, if not the thickest sounding of all of these. The bass is just overwhelming in my opinion, as it doesn't have the mids, upper mids and treble to keep up, so it kind of becomes an IEM which is very genre specific, and I guess will be fine for bass hits, but it loses out on that. The ZVX, as you guys know, is one of my favorite IEMs, especially using either the LED short tips or wide bores. Wide bores like I've got here on the DFI. If you use these type of wide bores, it is absolutely fantastic. It sounds really nice. If I have to fault it, maybe the extension past 10K could be just a little bit more, but that's about it. Let's put it that way. And then DFI, it's got the tuning switches, and there's a lot of kind of similarities. If you pick up a DFI, and if you pick up here the Polaris, the faceplate design is kind of the same thing. The overall thickness of the shell, everything is very similar. You can see that everything transpires a very high degree of similarity, of common DNA. Yeah, the DFI, in terms of its mid presentation, was absolutely amazing. If anything that was at fault was it needed just a little extra bass, and to that extent, the no switch version actually gives you that little extra bass that I think this should have had. It's got the tuning switches, obviously also emphasize the bass and so on, but even with the switches all in basically on the first three switches on, like you can see here, the bass, it's a well done bass, it's a well executed bass, but it's just enough. Okay, it's just enough. it doesn't, in my opinion at least, keep up with the mids and the highs, something which the ZVX does better, and something which the non-switch version of the DFI does better. And then we've got the caster there on the top, dual driver, not a fair comparison, but the fact that that costs $15, it made sense to bring it here. You have the Harman tuned version, which is that one, and you got the bass version. Either one of them are very, very good, and either one of them are fantastic. For the price, you can't really put a fault to it, okay? That's the truth. Then here on the CRA line, we've got the original CRA, which even today when I listen to it, and now this has been out for like, I don't know, I believe this came out in 2020. This IM is really something. I mean, okay, fair enough, this was $13, I believe, back in the day. This is the same price, so if you look at the cost and what you're getting, obviously this one is much nicer. I mean, the build quality here is a little bit on the cheap side comparatively to this one. This one just looks the part, it just looks that much better. This was using an XUN driver, this one, if I'm not mistaken, and it was the first one to use a very thin diaphragm thickness, which enabled it to have quite a nice extension. Okay, so in terms of its treble performance, it was actually quite good. It was only just the peak at 5 and maybe the little bit less energetic area between 2 and 4 that maybe was a problem. But the truth is the CRA, much like the Blon 03 is for Blon, I think is still that IM that in terms of a single dynamic put CCA on the limelight. Because it's very good. It's as simple as that. It just plays very well. It's a very prominent V. Yes, loads of bass, but the bass that's there, the mids that are there, the highs, everything just kind of comes together in a very fun, engaging, and correct manner to a certain extent. Even obviously with the foam tips, it helps control that 5K peak, and that's why I've got the foam tips on it. And it's just a fantastic IM. Honestly, it really is a very nice IM. The revised version, which is this one that I have here, is nothing more, nothing less than basically the CXS driver that's been put in a different shell. This doesn't have the same mojo as the OG CRA. That's my opinion, okay? The CRA Plus, I don't have it here because I just thought it was okay, the IEM, it was nice, they improved the upper mids and treble and the way it was presented, but it was just, okay, fine, it was just there, that's it. It never really caught on. Then we have the Lyra and the CXS, which basically share the same driver. The difference obviously is the shell. This is a nice shell, but it does look cheap, while the CXS shell looks the part. I mean, with that hole there and everything, it just looks very, very nice. In terms of their performance and their sound, this one is a little bit leaner, or comes across as perhaps a little bit leaner in the bass as that one compared to that one, and it does have a little bit more energy there in that area between 4 and 6.5K more or less, which cues things towards a more mid-centric presentation, while this one balances things out. And the main thing really is that by bringing down that area there between 4 and 7K, it actually brings down a little bit of the sibilance that can sometimes occur. Okay. How does this then stand comparatively to all of this? Well, in the setting that I used, which is with the bass in the maximum maximum level, I'm basically getting the same bass as I'm getting on the ZVX, as on the DFI, as on the CXS. So I've got a bass energy which is about the same. There is a slight difference in the impact of that bass. There is, I'm not going to deny. And in things like, for example, House of Groove from Eugene Groove, which is, it's a song that in the beginning it's got a nice drum. The drums are really nice in the beginning. It's good to see how quick a driver is if it starts, stops. You notice that, for example, the CXS and the DF5 to a certain extent, although at a little bit less energetic level, they just sound a little bit extra snappier than what the Polaris does. The same situation happens there as well with the ZVX, by the way. The ZVX also has that extra snappiness. It's not major differences, but you do notice that that one, and this one, they do have that extra snappiness, okay? The mids, then, the way that the mids is done, it's fine. It you know, not really, nothing is really forward or aggressive or harsh. There's a dip then after the initial pin again, and a little section there of the response which kind of plateaus. There's a dip there around that's 5 to 7, 8-ish K. There's a dip there. I'll show it to you in the graph, so you'll see it. And depending on what tip you use, that dip gets less or more pronounced. With the stock tip, that dip is more pronounced. With the KB07, it's less pronounced, and I think it works better with this tip because besides, like I said, tightening up things, as I was mentioning before, having that less dip, it just makes vocals, female vocals, and that transition into the upper mids and then into the treble just sound more, I'm not going to say alive because it's got but it just sounds a little bit more open, okay, that little extra open, all right. Extension past 10K is there, nothing significant. I mean, compared to the DFI, definitely less than the DFI. Compared to the caster, definitely less than the caster as well. But it's sufficient. I mean, I would say that the balance of the three main frequency bands is pretty well obtained. Okay, compared to the DQS, it's a better IEM than the DQS. That's not even a question. It's just a more coherent sounding IEM. Compared to the ZVX and the DFI, well, let's be honest here. If the switches are something that you appreciate, and you know, you might not want always so much bass, and you want to bring down the bass a little bit more, then yes, then this probably makes more sense than the ZVX. However, if you are like me that wants the bass in its maximum setting, compared to the ZVX, and if you have a ZVX, this is not an upgrade by no means. These are basically very similar IEMs. Actually, I would say that the ZVX edges out slightly the Polaris when it comes to the way that the mids and the upper mids and the treble are overall presented. Okay. Compared to the DFI also has the switches, so it offers a little bit more versatility in terms of the tuning and how you want to have it and so on. But again, it's not an upgrade, especially now that you can get it for cheaper as well. It's definitely not an upgrade. They are basically the same IEM with just slight differences in how those mids and up. While here, for example, you have the mids having a pin again, which kind of peaks at around close to 4K, let's put it that way. And then, as I said, you have that dip and then an up again. Over there, it peaks a little bit early. It peaks in the 2 to 3K area, as does the ZVX, which is the more common area to peak. This peaks up a little. This peaks at slightly later frequency. So it's like I said, it just makes things. It just lacks that extra little bit of more openness in the sound, a little bit that little forwardness that sometimes is actually quite welcomed. But guys, trust me, these are, you know, very minor differences with specific IEMs that are here. With others, like the DQS, the difference is very noticeable. But with the ones which I think are the standout ones here, which are the ZVX, the DFI, and the caster, the difference is very, very minimal. Very minimal. Compared here to the CRA, the original one, I like more, to be honest, I like more the presentation of the bass as compared to the Polaris. I like it more there. Obviously then the lower mids are a little bit more closed down as compared to here. So, okay, and this has got a little bit more extension than over here. Look, this has got the switches. I think this wins because of the switches. You're not going to get it. At best, you're going to get the newer one. And the newer one is, in my opinion, inferior to the original. And the newer one is also inferior to the Polaris. So the newer CRA is inferior to the Polaris, especially because of the way that area there between the transition from mids to upper mids. So 3, 4, 5, 6. The way that area is done is not as polished up and as nice and as easy as here. Compared to the Lyra and to the CXS, again, it's more in that area there of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7K. It's that in that area where you see the biggest differences. This can get a little bit sibilant. This one kind of brings it down and composes it nicely. You know, the bass also helps to make things sound a little bit more tamer, more controlled. This one doesn't have to control that much because it's already way more tamed, and it's got that dip there, which also is kind of helping. So I would ultimately say yes, that this is better than the Lyra, better than the current CRA. And when it comes to the CXS, it's a little bit harder to choose a clear winner. I would say that they are again very equal. Okay, so we have the Polaris beating not the original CRA, forget that, but beating the CRA, the latest version of it, the 2023 version, let's put it that way, beating as well the Lyra, beating the DQS. The ZVX, no, it doesn't beat it in my opinion, neither does it beat the DFI. And as for the caster, okay, it's not a fair comparison because it's got two drivers, this has got one, so not entirely the fairest of comparisons, but that costs basically the same price as this. So when you consider that, you know, in terms of what you're getting for your money, that's the better option. And ultimately, actually, that was probably the best IEM out of all of them when you consider what you're getting and for how much money you're getting. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's got the switches. It's got a decent build. It's got a very nicely done tune. Two drivers. The caster does everything that it's asked of it in a very nice manner. That's my opinion. It just plays very nicely. There's no real fault that you can point towards it. So there you have it, guys. I mean, the Polaris is a nice attempt. I'm not gonna deny it. I would have perhaps liked for the way that the upper mids and treble are done to have been done slightly a little bit different, just slightly different. The rest of the frequency range is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I think maybe if they had tried to do the upper mids and treble more along the lines of the ZVX or the FI, maybe that would have been a better option, a better choice. But as I've mentioned before, and I'll show you now in the graphs next, you'll see the difference between this, okay, the ZVX, the DFI, and the caster are not big differences. They are small differences, and in that those three, they do edge out the Polaris. Okay, so if you have those three, this is not an upgrade. All right, if you have the CXS, it's a tougher one. All right, let's put it that way. Anyway, guys, before I show you the graphs, technically, timbre and tonality I think is the better characteristic that it has in terms of its technicalities. Soundstage a little bit on the close side. The soundstage on the DFI is better. In the caster it's better. On the ZVX it's better. It's got a more expansive, a wider sounding, more spacious sounding soundstage. Imaging is okay, it's acceptable. Resolution again is acceptable, and detail retrieval as well is acceptable. But the standout for me at least is its timbre and its tonality. The timbre and the tonality, they do sound very correct, and you know, nothing really sounds off or strange or weird. All right, guys, I'll show you now the graphs and we'll wrap it up. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section for the CCA Polaris. This is the stock setting with no switches on, with the start tips on it, and as you can see, you know, sub bass focus, a little bit of a bleed into the mids, but nothing really too dramatic, and then a pin again that peaks at around like 3.5 more or less, and then that dip that I mentioned to you earlier, another peak which is kind of coupler related and some extension. This whole area ends up sounding a little bit more darker than what maybe you would get the perception that it does from the graph. Okay, and then as you start switching on the switches, you know, start putting them on, you get basically 1 dB increases, one, and then you get 2 dB increase, and then you get a 3 dB increase, and then the finals with all the switches on, it basically just increases everything across the board uniformly. It's not important to see. It's basically the same thing as this. Okay, it's basically just the same as this, just with a little bit, another 2 dBs across the board over everything. All right, now this is using the start tip. As I mentioned, I changed it out, and I experimented with other tips, and the tip that I found worked better for me, and I liked the way that it sounded, was with the KB07s. And the KB07 tip just kind of changed the profile a little bit here in the treble area, and in the extension past 10K kind of helped out to improve a little bit the technicalities, give it a slightly bigger sound station. This is the way I listened to the Polaris. Okay, So now compare them to the IMs that I selected. Then let's go through all of them here nicely. So first one that I selected, well, not the first one, but one of the IMs that I selected was the original CCA, the CRA. That's the OG CRA. Bass on the original OG just sounds a little bit fuller, extra fuller. Maybe because of the fact that also this area bit of the upper mid is slightly subdued, so you feel that more there. But it does have definitely got more treble and more twinklies and sparklies, more detail up top. It definitely has, okay? As compared, and I'll just put now the second generation of the CRA. The second generation, yes, does improve this upper mid area, okay? But by improving this or giving it more energy, it kind of shuts down a little bit. Let me just take away for a second the Polaris. It kind of shuts down the bass in the way that it just doesn't have the same kind of vibe, the bass. I apologize here for the difference in the peak here. This is just slightly shifted over. Basically, the difference between the two of them is that you have more upper mids, sorry, in the current version of the CRA, but you don't have as much detail up top, so less twinklies and sparklies. And the bass also sounds slightly different, but this is the one you can get now, so this is the one that should be compared, and the OG doesn't make sense. So compared to the Polaris, this is what we have, okay? Polaris in black. It doesn't have that area there of 5K, which can be problematic for some, and also the current CRA doesn't have as much detail as you would think here by looking at just the graph. All right, so that's that. Compared now to the Lyra and to the CXS. The Lyra is this one here, number 12, okay? Very much the same situation as with the current CRA. Actually, if I just put the current CRA back on for a second, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so this is the current CRA, and that's the Lyra. And it's for me, in my opinion, and I said it, for me it's the same driver, okay? Imagine the peak at 8K being there precisely on top. It's the same driver, okay? That's it. So when I compare the Polaris to the Lyra, the Lyra is just not as smooth. It's a little bit more aggressive. It's got that 5K peak there, which can be problematic and so on. So on the CXS, they've kind of helped do away with that issue, okay? And they've also increased slightly the bass. If I just take away again the Polaris, this doesn't seem like much, but when you listen to the CXS and you compare it to the Lyra, because they've brought down this peak here, which can be problematic, automatically whatever bass you have from behind sounds more live. So it just sounds a little bit more bassier. One will sound slightly more bassy, the other one will sound a little bit more detailed in the mids, okay? As compared to the Polaris, is what you want to know. They are a closer match. Let's put it that way. The CXS and the Polaris are a closer match. So although I would say that yes, the Polaris beats the Lyra outright, with the CXS, I'm not entirely. Yes, I guess ultimately it will edge it out, but not an easy edging out. Let's put it that way. All right. So that's all of the CRAs. Compared now then to the KZs that I selected. So the first one here I'm going to show you is, where is it, if I can find it, of course, is so the CXS I can take away. This is not doing anything here. The Lyra I can also remove it. Where is the DQS? CRA I can also remove it. The CRA I can remove. This one I can also remove. Okay, that's better now. So compared to the DQS, where are we? DQS. No, I apologize. I have to go fetch it. I thought I had it here, but I don't have it. So KZ DQS. Apology, guys. KZ DQS. Yes, here we go. KZ DQS. That's it. All right. And now just align it. Compared to the DQS, as I mentioned earlier, it just the DQS is just way too bass heavy. Yes, that area there of 5K is reduced, it's not a problem, but it's just too bass heavy and just shuts down everything past that. It's just not as a pleasant listen as you would think. It's just very, comparatively, it's just very muddy. The Polaris is warm, this one is just muddy, it's just bloated, okay? Then compared to the DFI, the DFI, yes, there we go, number 10. Compared to the DFI, a lot of similarities, but the DFI edges out the Polaris by just having that little extra amount of energy here in the early part of the upper mids, more treble, and then better extension up top. It just sounds more open, there's more sound stage, it's bigger, more airy, okay, which is very much the same situation that happens as well with the ZVX. The ZVX is this one here, number 12. Same situation, okay. Let me just take away the DFI for a second. The ZVX as well kind of has the same extension as the Polaris, using that wide bore tip, but it just, this area of the upper mids and treble on the ZVX just sounds a little bit extra detailed. It's difficult for me to explain, but it just sounds a little bit more. It's not a monumental difference, but you know, if you have a ZVX, the Polaris is not it's not going to beat it, unless you want to control the bass and have it less bassy. Then fine, then I can say that the Polaris is a worthwhile purchase. But if you have the ZVX, going for the Polaris is not an upgrade, definitely, okay. As for the DFI, it's the same situation, okay, the same, absolutely same situation. The DFI, better in terms of its technicalities, better in terms of the upper mids and treble. Definitely, way more. You notice there's a bigger difference in terms of detail and everything. You notice. I would actually say DFI, ZVX, and then Polaris. I would put them in that order, okay? And then very close to the Polaris, then the CXS and the original CRA. That's how I would rate them. And then finally, the Caster. Although, you know, it's not entirely a fair comparison, because obviously the Caster's got two drivers, but the Caster, it's this one here, it's got, again, more detail up top. Vocals are slightly more forward, which just opens up and gives a different dynamic to the whole presentation. More in terms of treble, definitely, and again, a bigger sensation of air, of space up top. So Caster, again, you know, it edges out the Polaris. It's not entirely a fair comparison because it's two drivers against one, but it's a better IM and basically costs the same thing. So there you have it, guys. I mean, the Polaris is a solid enough IM compared to the CXS, to the CCA other offerings. Yes, I can agree with saying that it's probably the best one up to date. All right, fine. I'm not gonna make too much of that. You know, opinions will vary, but overall, I will say that it's a better IM than the other CCA offerings to date. Compared to the KZs, I mean, like I mentioned, if I am comparing it to the ZVX, no, I don't think it beats the ZVX. I honestly don't think it beats the ZVX. It definitely does not beat the DFI. Definitely does not beat the DFI. And also the Caster, it also doesn't beat it. You know, that's just the way I perceive it. That's the way I see it and listen to it. All right, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask me. You take care now. Bye bye.